metal perspective. From Danzig to death, to Dark Throne to Dr. Shrinker. Buckle up, things are about to get heavy. This is the Metal Podcast. Let's rock and roll.
And welcome to another episode of the Metal Podcast, the best show with DJ on it. I am AC, and I am joined as usual by the greatest co-host, but also the worst at beefing me up. DJ, how are you doing?
I'm going to get better, I promise, but I'm doing fantastic. How are you today?
I am great. And, we've had a pretty unique set of weeks. We're going to keep this going. Like we got another guest, director of Get Thrashed, Rick Ernst. How are you, my friend?
What's up, guys? I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Decade-old film, and you're still wanting to talk about it.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome. Love it.
It's relevant, man. Amazing.
Yeah. So and that's something that we bring up. So, do you like grunge?
I do, actually.
Okay.
I do.
So, how come there's more interest in thrash metal now and more bands that are thrash than grunge? Because grunge was the thing that kind of destroyed metal, but metal is still popping up, despite not really popping up in the mainstream. But how many years was it? 15 years since you made that?
Yeah, 2008 it came out, so 15 years.
Wow.
Well, I think what you have is you have a group of fans, metal fans and thrash metal fans that are diehard. It's almost passed down through the generations, through the DNA, and it's worldwide. So I think you have a worldwide phenomenon that, it may be pushed down a little bit, may go underground, but it's always there. Grunge was like a shining star, a shooting star that just, kind of exploded for a few years and was huge. And then, of course, the biggest bands in that genre are no longer with us. Nirvana, and Soundgarden, unfortunately. I love both those bands, but they're not here. Alice in Chains, right? So you take some of the biggest bands of that genre, they're no longer here. You look at what they call the Big Four, and you can talk about the Big 10 or 12, and they're all, in some way, shape, or form, still around thrash metal. Whether it's Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax, Megadeth, Testament, Exodus. I mean, all these bands are still around in some shape or form to kind of, push the genre forward and also to remind people of how great this music was. You don't really have that for grunge. It's more of a nostalgia, in my opinion, because those bands are no longer here, pounding the pavement, playing shows, getting people excited and interested in the music. Grunge is, I think it's a smaller, less enthusiastic crowd, than the metal fans.
I think it was very much a product of its era too, but I think that's a lot of music is in general like that, where grunge was very big for a very small period of time. But what I use that as the example because if you go watch any behind the music for every single hair metal band, and there's always this section. They thought the party would never end, but then along came Nirvana. It's in all of them. But and there's probably not so many hair metal bands popping up. DJ and I saw a recent one some years back, and I'll tell that story some other time. But thrash metal is still, and not just thrash metal, like death metal, black metal. As far as I'm concerned, metal, real metal is. The real nitty gritty of it is it's thrash, death, and black metal. And these genres now, while especially death and black metal never really got commercial success where thrash metal did, Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer, but death metal and black metal, it's you can go to a club in a major city where they're still doing metal nights or whatever, or someone opening for whatever kind of legacy band is still going around. And you're going to still see real death metal and real black metal. But bands, whether it's grunge or even new wave or disco, all these things that were pretty much just a reflection of the era. metal is kind of the sore thumb, where it's just kind of an evolution of rock and roll, where I don't think grunge is an evolution of rock and roll. It's almost kind of like a manifestation of the 90s nihilism, which is kind of the come down of the 80s cocaine parties. And it was never really captured because the youth had never been as decadent as it was in the 90s, like in the years after. Because what were the bands that came after grunge? It was like Eve 6, Third Eye Blind, Vertical Horizon.
That's another big thing, is that, Get Thrashed talks about, thrash metal and what thrash metal gave birth to, whether it's death metal, black metal, or a bunch of, young kids playing their version of thrash metal. In some cases, it was almost exactly the version that Exodus was playing, but, the point being is that they influenced a whole nother genre, a whole nother, age group, basically, and other genres as well. Whereas I think when you look at grunge, you don't have so much of that, you don't have, the bands coming out there. I know you have bands saying that I love Nirvana, I love Alice in Chains, but I think
it's always core, those bands,
it wasn't as influential. I mean, I gotta say, I don't think it was as influential. It was more popular, but I don't think it was as influential as thrash and metal.
Well, thrash metal specifically, because like that's kind of like if you think about like Clark Gable and Elizabeth Taylor, like that's the golden age of Hollywood. Thrash metal, that's the golden age of rock and roll. Like it was like if there was some kind of like a chart or a graph where it's like maximum accessibility to listeners versus like maximum edge and aggression for music, it is thrash metal. Like because I kind of heard it in reverse order. Like I heard like here, listen to this. Like, what is this? Absurd. Like, no. Like, what is this? Cannibal Corpse. No. What is this? Megadeth. Oh, I can listen to this. This is acceptable. And then once you listen to everything else that sounds like that, then okay, now I understand Cannibal Corpse. Okay, now I understand Emperor. Like, okay, I get it. Like, you gotta ease your way into it. Where thrash metal is very accessible because it's not just noise.
And just getting back to the grunge thing, thrash metal, when I go to see shows, I can really see and feel the influence, whether it be Slayer or Exodus, on a band when I go to see them. There are a lot of bands that say, we were influenced by Nirvana or Alice in Chains, but somewhere between Alice in Chains and the music these new bands are producing, it's kind of lost in the mix. Like that influence is not as evident to me. Like I can draw a straight line from Exodus to Bonded by Blood, by name, certainly. I can draw a straight line from Nuclear Assault to Municipal Waste. I can hear the influence. When you say you're influenced by Nirvana and Soundgarden, if you're in a band, to me, it's almost like saying you were influenced by
Led Zeppelin.
Like rock music, like Led Zeppelin. Yeah, it's so broad and so generic that it's hard to say, oh yeah, I can see the influence there. Whereas with thrash metal, I think it's more evidence. And listen, as a quick aside here, I like grunge metal. I like grunge, right? And when the metal scene was sort of falling apart in the 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, I was at MTV. I was working at MTV, and I was pissed because I worked on Headbangers Ball as an intern with Ricky Rackman, and they canceled Headbangers Ball.
Did you get to go to Action?
You know what? I got an Action Park story. That was like my second day of interning.
Heck yeah.
And I knew they were going to Action Park, and I figured I've been to Action Park so many times. I love Alice in Chains. This is great. And the day before, they're like, yeah, we're going to actually need you to stay in the office and do some work for us on this other project we're doing, this country music project. And to this day, the producers of the show, Nancy and Eva, when I see them, I'm like, I'll never forgive you guys. My first week on the job, and you're like, Dwight Yoakam country special. We need you to work on that. And I saw you guys all walk out the door and go to Action Park. And everybody always, of course, says it's the greatest Headbangers Ball show ever. And I'm like, and I was in the office pulling Dwight Yoakam videos. That's where I was.
Oh no.
But I saw Headbangers Ball get canceled, you know, and I was very upset. And eventually, I went on to associate produce, and then produce a show called 120 Minutes. And all the bands that I had hated so much because I was such a metal fan were on 120 Minutes. But I do have to say, in hindsight, it was a great experience, because where I was at that time was at the epicenter, the birth of grunge metal. I was watching these bands on Headbangers Ball and in 120 Minutes, and I was kind of watched that whole scene explode. I saw one scene die and one scene born, and to be there at MTV when that was happening, I look back and I was really very fortunate to be there to see all that happening. It was just an amazing time for music, something I know I'll never see again. And who knows if any of us will see something like that again. Two scenes like that colliding, one kind of going underground and one exploding. It was a fun time, but I was pissed. They canceled my show. And that's one of the reasons why I went on to produce Get Thrashed. Because I was pissed because the music was getting, you know, kicked to the curb by MTV and by, you know, mainstream media. I was angry, you know, like a lot of thrash bands, right? They did the music, they created songs and albums and music because they were mad. I was mad that people were dissing thrash metal. So I went out and made a film that, you know, tried to shine a spotlight on them and show how important they were.
Wow.
That was the first documentary about thrash metal? Like I'm serious on that front.
Yeah.
Because
it was. And when I was making the movie from 2002 to about 2007, at the same time, I knew that Headbangers Journey, Sam Dunn's movie, was in production. And we had exchanged emails, just, basically, hey, I'm doing this movie. Oh, I'm doing this movie. And also American Hardcore, which was Paul Rackman and Stephen Blush. They were doing their film on the hardcore punk scene. So the three of us, kind of like at the time, the big three of, rock and metal documentaries. And I remember going to see Sam's movie. He emailed me, said, hey, we're, screening in New York, before it was released worldwide. I'd love you to check it out. And I was so afraid that he was going to cover the thrash metal scene in that movie. And I came out of it going, why? He didn't touch the thrash metal scene. So I dodged a bullet because I had no budget. It was so DIY. I knew I knew time was on my side, but not money. Like I couldn't do this thing in a year or two. I needed 5 years to make it. So Sam's movie didn't touch thrash metal. American Hardcore didn't touch thrash metal. Get Thrashed was the first thrash metal documentary.
That's amazing. How do you even get the ability to interview, like Dave Mustaine? And I know you did this over 5 years, and it looks like you interviewed them at different times.
Well, well, it also specifically because when I was watching it, and there's the part where it's Gary Holt, Tom Hunting, and Steve Souza, and I'm like, okay, given the time frame, this is the Rob Dukes era. So, like, did you interview? And also, and Paul Bostoff was in the band at the time. So I'm like, did you just get these people? And then it later says Exodus. Like, okay.
Yeah, it was very confusing for me because as you mentioned, I interviewed, Gary and Zetro and Tom, and it was Exodus. They came out,
You're right in front of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was Exodus. Exodus had just reformed and come back. And then all of a sudden I'm making the movie and Zetro's gone. So I'm like, oh my God, we got to change his lower third. We got to make him Exodus to make it current. And of course, by the time the movie's even finished, Zetro's back in the band again. So that's one of my pet peeves. If I could go back and certainly redo a few things, that would be one of them. I was chasing what was current. And what was current was Zetro was Exodus. It was the Rob Dukes era. But of course, he came back and, the rest is history. But you're correct. I interviewed them at different times. And the way I was able to do that was MTV. I had worked at MTV as an intern on Headbangers Ball, so I knew a lot of the label people. Didn't necessarily know the bands because I was just an intern and a production assistant. They didn't know me. But the label people knew me because I had to reach out to them for promotional materials and CDs, advanced CDs and stuff. And through those contacts and connections, I was able to say, hey, I want to interview Metallica. I need to interview Slayer. And the managers and the label people, they all jumped because, it's Rick from MTV, let's hook him up because eventually, maybe he'll be able to hook us up. He works at MTV. So that's how I was able to get everybody. In fact, I remember going to Ohio Stadium to interview Metallica. And, Laura sits down and I remember the label rep going, "Hey, this is Rick from MTV. He's doing a documentary for MTV. And I just turned and said, yeah, it's a documentary for MTV.
Yeah, come on. I mean, MTV could air it. Who's to say?
So that's how I got almost all the talent in the movie. It was through MTV. And then once Metallica signed on and Slayer signed on and Anthrax, once the big bands were all on board, then everybody wanted to be a part of it, which was amazing,
It's a snowball effect.
Yeah.
So you probably haven't listened to a lot of our episodes, but full disclosure, we are not a Metallica fan here. But I have said it many times, of course I'd welcome James or Lars on the show. Not that they ever would, but it's undeniable their place in music history. And I still say this, Metallica is the biggest rock band in the world. Like,
absolutely.
So like, even though like they haven't really been a thrash metal band in 35 years, I'm sure you look on them more fondly than I do. Not that I don't like them at all. but it's less for musical reasons, and it's more for their part in the destruction of mainstream thrash metal. But still being able to sit down with people that are the biggest rock band in the world, that is amazing. Like we are Dave Mustaine respecters on this show.
Yeah, and I gotta say, Metallica. Listen, I one listen to the last album, the new album, don't like it. But like, listen, I can
a show on it.
Yeah, I can say that Metallica, if I had to pick a band, is probably my favorite band of all time and the most influential band in my musical journey. Because to hear Kill 'Em All, Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightnings, and Injustice for All, to hear those first 4 albums as a 15-year-old to 22-year-old kid, it was so influential. And to see them for the first time, on those tours, I can't describe how amazing it was to be there and see that. So they'll always have my respect for that. Love those albums and the way they influence my musical taste. I also will say that Lars and Kirk did not have to sit down with me for 45 minutes, an hour almost. Yeah. They each sat down with me for that long for an interview about thrash metal. It was not about,
not about how cool
it was
Lars
opening
is
for them or anything else. They knew it was about thrash metal. They knew it was one guy with a camera and a light. It was a very low-fi production. And they sat there and they couldn't have been any cooler and kinder. So again, I'll always give them credit for that. They were really super, super cool. I don't have to like the newer stuff that they're doing, but I do have to give them a lot of credit for sitting down with me, giving me the time, and essentially being the first building block of the documentary. They weren't the first band I interviewed, but they were the first big band, and they were the band. Once people saw Metallica were in Get Thrashed, everybody wanted in, and it just opened the floodgates. So they were huge. They were huge in my musical journey. They were huge in Get Thrashed. And I said, I may not like every song, every album, but I always respect, what they've done for metal and for rock.
Well,
and for me personally with the film.
Oh, for sure.
Well,
that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and they're also still influential for us because we talk about them so often. And honestly, like I'm making it sound like we are harsher on them than we really are. And most of it just comes down to their role in the decline of metal being popular. And it's less that they made Load and Reload. Those albums are terrible. But how many metal bands had terrible albums in the 90s? Very few have a clean slate. Like Destruction has those 3 terrible albums without Schmear. The creator has Endorama, the El Diablo Musica from Slayer, Risk, which we stand by is like one of the worst records. So bad. So they didn't have to. Lars, it's like, I don't have time for you. Who are you? You're some one guy with a camera and a light. I have Limp Bizkit to open for me.
Yeah. And listen, another story I'll tell you about Lars. I was working at MTV, and it was the day after the VMAs. I forget what year it was. It must have been like 1999, something way back when. And we were filming an episode, like the biggest metal videos of the year or something like that, whatever it was. And we were filming with Lars at a place called Hogs and Heifers in New York City. It's kind of a, dive bar, scrappy bar, rock bar. And we were filming there, 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock on a Friday, I guess it was. Now, 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock on a Friday, typically in many places, is happy hour. In this place, it was in an area where you had a lot of construction workers that would show up for happy hour. So during the back end of this shoot, we had very drunk, angry construction workers in the back of the shot with Lars that were, really causing havoc. One of them actually jumped up on the bar behind Lars, pulled his pants down, essentially over Lars's head. And again, I got to tell you, to Lars's credit, Lars took a slug of whiskey, turned around, and just spit the thing at the guy, and the guy laughed and walked away. It was chaos because it was a bunch of drunk dudes. And this is a guy, Lars, who is rich and famous at this point. This is, 99. Imagine, their Black Album, Money Rich.
Yeah.
He could have just walked out and said, "To hell with this. This is way too much. I'm not doing this." He finished the shoot. He didn't complain. And to this day, I'm just like, man, I don't know if I would have even done that, because you got all these guys yelling and screaming and just being jerks. Why do I have to do this? I'm just going to leave. Let them figure out what to do with it. He stayed and took all the torture. and he dished it back. Like I said, it wasn't like he just stood there, slug of whiskey.
Oh, gosh.
Well,
and it made it in the show.
Good on him. Well, yeah, that's good content.
So I don't want to sit here and seem like I'm defending Metallica, but I can't give you any Lars was a dick to me kind of story.
Well, I don't think we've ever maintained that attitude. I think we've been kind of pretty positive towards them as people. It's just the business angle. It's just like the Black Album 100% changed mainstream rock. And I see, and this is why I'm not the Metallica guy. See, you were there when it happened. You got to see that flower blossom. My first exposure to Metallica was hearing Enter Sandman 73 times a day, just watching MTV. And this is metal, and then I have to hear Fuel when it comes out. I'm like, no, thank you. And then I have a buddy, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Metallica's good." I'm like, "That band that makes those terrible cheesy dad rock songs?" No. He's like, "Oh no, you got to hear old Metallica." I'm like, "Oh, this isn't the same band. What are you talking about?" And then he said,
Listen,
that.
Let me just say, for us fans who were there from the beginning to hear the first 4 records, I'll never forget getting the Black Album, first Metallica album I had on cassette, and brought it into. I was working in a supermarket in the seafood department, and I couldn't wait to listen to it. I popped it in during work. And the disappointment that your favorite band, your idols, have delivered this. And, listen, it's one of the best-selling albums of all time, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, there'll be people out there that'll say, "What are you talking about? How can you be disappointed?" But we all know as metal fans, especially us with the first 4 albums, to hear that, I mean, it was literally a kick in the gut. I just remember being in that seafood department when that album was done playing back to back on the cassette. It's just being so disappointed and thinking, I think my favorite band is gone. They're not what they used to be. Listen,
they weren't.
I understand their musical journey, and they had to do something different. They were tired of writing 6, 7, 8 minute songs. So I don't begrudge them that they did something different. But my personal story is that as a fan hearing that for the first time, I was kind of crushed.
Well, I look at it a little differently. I don't begrudge them for wanting to make a lot of money. That's how I look at it. Because I mean, the Injustice for All still sold 3 million records, so it's not like they were in poverty at the time. But I think at a certain point, it's like, well, we're starting to experience fame. Like, let's become superstars. But I think that they missed an opportunity with the Black Album. It shouldn't have been called Metallica. It should have been named after one of the songs on the album. It should have been called Sad But True.
Yeah, I agree.
In the documentary,
and also, by the way, I want to point out, you are the first person that I have heard express disappointment in the Black Album after Injustice for All. I know so many people, they're like, no, the Black Album's great. And I'm just like,
how old are they?
like 40 something, 50 something. I think you have the sensible position.
Yeah, exactly.
It's refreshing. And again, I don't want to hate on them, but when you go from Dyer's Eve to of Wolf and Men, it's not the same band.
Yeah. I mean, crushed. That's the only word I can use after that album was done in the cassette player in the seafood department of the supermarket. Crushed. Crushed that there wasn't any fast, heavy songs from the previous albums.
You're listening to this album and you're like, something smells fishy here.
Exactly.
There you go. Now, there's something in the documentary. I mean, for me, there's a few highlights. I love Dave Mustaine and even Bobby Blitz, but Dave Mustaine kind of was the only one that was you could tell I wouldn't say he said anything negative, but he would say I was faster than them when I was in Metallica. And Bobby Blitz saying that, Dave Mustaine is the best songwriter in Metallica. And he said, and still is. But I did have a question, something obvious to me that popped up. The original Metallica lineup, it seemed like Eddie Trunk forgot about Ron McGovney.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
So they said Cliff was the original.
Metallica may have forgotten about Ron McGovney.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Who was the other guitar player before Dave, though? It was the other guy.
I got to be honest with you. I don't remember his name. I don't remember the name before Dave. But I think I don't know if Eddie necessarily forgot or what I encouraged was just hey, we have to pick a spot to start the documentary. We can go back to the first bass player and the first guitar player. We can go back to before Metallica and where do we start? Because there were people that said, you should have started earlier with Venom and Motorhead. And
you have 90 minutes or 105 minutes. I
really wanted it to be about 100 minutes. I didn't want it to be this epic 3-hour documentary. So I was pretty adamant that we're going to start with, 82, 83, Metallica and the bands of that time period and how they exploded. And I think when you think of other band members, if they didn't play on the album, that's one thing. That's certainly one reason why maybe they're not mentioned. Maybe Ron's not mentioned.
Or the demo.
Dave, yeah, No Life Till Leather wasn't mentioned, but Dave was mentioned as an original. So that's I'm not saying anyone forgot, but I think even Kirk or Lars
and even Venom is mentioned too.
Merciful Fate.
It was hard to try and pick a spot that we're really going to take off launch from. And
you're condensing 10 years.
People that were forgotten. You could say Neil Turbin in Anthrax. He was there in the beginning, and we really didn't give Neil props that he
was mentioned.
Deserves. It's no diss to Neil Turbin. It's just that we had to pick a spot to jump off from. And one of the things that I tried to do is I tried to interview a lot of bands, as you guys have seen.
Oh, you
so
did.
That if somebody asked me, how come you didn't talk about how influential a band this band was, I would say I interviewed about 50 people. And nobody mentioned that band as being an influence on them. So if they were 0 for 50, they're probably not going to be included in the documentary. I might love the band. I might have all the albums. But if nobody mentioned them as being influential in the scene or musically, then we probably have to just, move on. So I think that probably applies to certain band members as well.
You have to
Okay, that
condense
makes a
an
lot of sense.
entire decade down to an hour and a half ish. So, some stuff is going to get cut. And look, let's say the thing is, Ron McGovney is the Pete Best of Metallica. Like, the only thing about him, like, I don't know, maybe he's a really nice guy and he lives a very successful life now. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know a single thing about him, but he's only famous for being in Metallica. Like, that's it. It's not like, well, during the Ron McGovney, those shows were, he brought energy. No, he was just a guy that was in Metallica before Cliff Burton.
Exactly. Like Cliff Burton, obviously, is somebody that people spoke about at length. So there were certain band members that Scott Ian or Gary Holt. There were specific people that everybody else pointed out. So it was obvious that we were going to focus on them. And, there are, again, other people like, Neil Turbin's a perfect example. Neil came out to the screening in LA and, I was worried about how he was going to, receive the film just because we don't mention Neil. We show him, he's in the film, some bootleg footage, but he's not mentioned. So, but again, we had to make decisions on time. We didn't have more than 100 minutes. In my mind, this had to be 90 to 100 minutes. Otherwise, it's just too long, and we're indulging ourselves and myself and my favorites. So,
well, it was also an era where you show a documentary, it will be in a movie theater, or maybe you would, you would rent it from the Blockbuster. Now, have you seen a modern do you like horror movies?
I do.
Have you seen the documentary on the Jason movies? It's like 6 hours long.
Oh, see, I'm out already.
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like every documentary now is like, it's like everything has to be Ken Burns' Civil War. Like, it's now like a 12-hour epic. Like, you have to go over every detail. And this was the coffee shop where James bought his first coffee, which gave him the inspiration to write Hit the Lights. Now, I was the barista at that coffee shop there. Now, James came in one day. I thought he kind of looked like a wild man. Like that's what it would be like now. Where
and listen, all the streaming platforms want content. So there's and they have times or anything that might be on the cutting room floor in a normal world 20 years ago, we'll take it, because we need to fill our platforms with content. To me, certainly that's wonderful to be able to do that. I think the bigger challenge is to say, what, I'm going to make a film that the average person can sit down to in 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it may be, and understand the story and understand the vibe that I'm trying to get across. There are true crime documentaries that are 6 and 8 parters, and some of them are very well done. But for me, it was really important to make this, palatable for people who maybe don't love thrash metal. I don't want them to have to sit through a 4-hour documentary. I want them to 90 minutes in and out and say, you know what? I got what I needed. And then DVDs, which nobody has anymore, but the DVD had all bonus material on it. I should send it to you guys. Basically, it was a map. It was a globe. It was a map of the world. And if you clicked on Texas or you clicked on Germany or you clicked on, whatever, it would take you into the bands from that scene, and you'd get some information on the Texas scene or the bands from Arizona or whatnot, Canadian metal, stuff like that, Brazilian metal.
Well,
so
bands like Sodom you could do too. That's like
that's
one of my favorite thrash bands. I love them in there. They're funny.
I don't even know if you have a DVD player for this anymore, but I've got plenty of DVDs.
We do.
Yeah, we do. We've got DVD players.
Yeah, we do physical media. I don't like anything modern. I like old stuff. That's why we have a show where we talk about metal and we talk about we talk about two things. We talk about metal and rap on this show. Now, when we talk about things we like, we talk about metal. We talk about things we don't like, we talk about rap. And it's just kind of like a reflection of how we feel about certain eras. Where modern times, not so great. Old times, I mean, I don't want to date myself.
Talk about with rap, right?
A little bit. We read him rap lyrics.
Yeah,
oh, that's right. You did.
We read him the Lil Jon.
That's
or
right.
wait, what was it? Or Wappa with the Choppa, I think.
I think he's Wappa with the Choppa. Yeah, we
Yeah,
read him
that's
some
right.
drill rap. We did talk off air about rap a little more, just kind of like pick his brain about certain things. You know, and Andy will be back on the show. Wonderful, wonderful man.
Yes.
And okay. So I have to ask you this before we go any further. Now, is it Rick Ernst? Did I say that right? Okay, all right.
Yep.
I don't want to get acid bath because of the, I don't want to get
Rick Ernst is correct.
Okay,
Yes.
good. You know, don't want to put a hit on me for saying it wrong. I don't want to embarrass myself. So, would you consider doing this again under the modern documentary style, like the 6 hour whatever, like the multi-parter? Because you know, years later.
I was gonna say a part two to it.
I don't think I would. What I would consider doing, and what I had thought about early on, is this kind of leaves off thrash metal kind of being reborn out of the gut punch it took from grunge. And in my mind, the natural continuation is death metal, black metal, because just thinking of me in 90, 91, 92, 93, I was still listening to, all the thrash metal bands, but I was certainly getting into Death, Obituary, Machine Head, Sepultura, Pantera, all that stuff. To me, the death metal scene would be the natural continuation of this. But I don't know if I'm going to be the guy to do it, but that's what I would be interested in telling that story, because I think that's an interesting story to tell.
Well, if you want to produce it, we'll direct it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, because the reason I bring that up is because at the time, metal made a comeback in 2004. And I routinely use grunge as the example just because, like, it lost its popularity. But then metal kind of reemerged because it's timeless. It really is. That's like 2004, it had an Opeth, Megadeth, King Diamond, Exodus. There were like all these like huge bands had major releases that year, and that was just 1 year alone. Obviously, 2005 you have Enemy of God, Recreator, Shovel-Headed Kill Machine. Like they came back, but now they didn't really lose popularity after that second win. Like obviously they're not topping the charts like they may have been in the 80s, but still, like there's like a whole new generation of thrash bands out there. Like there's people that still send us stuff like, will you play this on your show? I'm like, yeah, we'll get there. Sorry, we got a long list. Or sorry, everybody, we'll get to you eventually.
Yeah, those old school thrash bands influenced a new wave of thrash bands. I wanted to say more than just new wave of thrash bands, a new wave of metal bands. And now those bands you often see touring together. Like Exodus is out right now with, is it Fit for an Autopsy?
Fit for an Autopsy, yeah.
Yeah, so like you see the newer bands and the older bands touring together, and you have fans, new and old, kind of getting into both. So it really is sort of pollinated across generations, and it's cool to see that. Certainly we all love an old school metal show. Testament, Exodus, Death Angel just came through, 4 months ago. So listen, that's a dream for everybody. But the reality is that an older band, to be able to tour with a younger band and tap into their audience and vice versa, it's important, and to see that happening and to see that accepted, it's good. It's good business for the bands, So
yeah. And you mentioned it in the documentary, and me and AC, we both, went through this when we were going to metal shows, is that you would have, a metal band, thrash band, like Exodus or Testament, but then you'd have them with like a band like Hatebreed or like a hardcore or one of those bands, and you have the
Job
guys
for a
headbanging.
cowboy.
They'd be
doing they're kung fu fighting. They're fighting invisible ninjas.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like it didn't go together. So it's nice to hear that now, the bands are kind of like finding a way to make it more acceptable, because it seemed kind of like forced. And to us, it's like, well, do you want to go in the pit? And you look and you're like, well,
I don't want to get kicked in the balls again. Yeah, I got kicked in the balls at an Exodus concert by some guy just like doing roundhouses. It's like, what are you doing, you dumbass?
Listen, that's bad. But I got to be honest with you. Growing up in the late '80s and '90s, when thrash metal and hardcore bands toured together, it was worse because there would be there'd be 10-on-1 beatdowns. When you go to see a show, I remember Destruction toured with the Cro-Mags, and it's just like, you know what, you can't even enjoy Destruction because the Cro-Mags fans are there just assaulting people, and the metal fans, whether they were loners or whether we were all like, lone wolves, independent, we all kind of were like separate. We came in, groups 2 or 3, but, you had a hardcore contingent that usually had like, 10, 20 people there. So, if you tried to fight one, not that I did, but if you tried to fight one, you were fighting all 20 of them. So it was very difficult because it wasn't just getting kicked in the balls. It was getting sent to the hospital with stitches and a broken nose
and getting kicked in the balls.
It just wasn't worth it. And we would see a tour like that. Oh man, we want to see Destruction, but we know this is going to be a mess. and it usually was. We still went, but it was a different experience. It would just be kind of hanging out in the back. And for the people who didn't know, they're seeing Destruction with a hardcore band. They didn't know or they didn't care. And just like, oh boy, here we go.
Oh, poor guy. Did you ever listen to Henry Rollins' audiobook, The Get in the Van?
I have not, but Henry's a very, very talented speaker and a smart guy. So I'd be interested in that. I have listened to Henry and William Shatner's Christmas song, which I love. Well,
that sounds pretty good. Well, I highly recommend it, but he paints a pretty negative picture of that type of audience, and you could tell that he really grew to resent those types of people. They would just go to their shows and like spit on them and like throw like beer at them, and that was like a regular mentality.
It was a pack of wolves. And listen, man, it wasn't fun. I mean, even if you like the music, it just was ruined by the fans that were there, and it sucks. It sucked, and I'm glad that it went away. It's not really present anymore.
Well,
but just before we leave Henry Rollins, you do have to check out William Shatner's Christmas album, and his version of Jingle Bells with Henry Rollins is just classic.
All right, now you have, before we leave Christmas songs, you have to check out DMX singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It is one of the funniest things you'll ever hear, because it's DMX singing like, but he's like but he's doing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He's not like trying to sing. He's like, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It's one of the funniest things you'll ever hear.
It was must have been 2 years ago. I had COVID for Christmas. I had a Christmas COVID gift. And I was locked in my room, basically listening to songs, exploring, deep diving. And that's how I found this William Shatner Christmas album featuring Henry Rollins. I also found, I forget what band it was, but it was like a symphonic death metal Christmas album. It was awesome.
Thank you, COVID.
Awesome. And it was just perfect. I'm sure my wife and daughter were walking past the room with symphonic death metal versions of Jingle Bells and like Hark the Herald Angels playing very loudly, and thinking, what is going on in there? Is it just COVID or is it something else?
There is some really impressive, like progressive metal band. I don't know the name of them, but it's just guitar, bass, and drums. It's like some of the best playing you'll ever hear. And then they wear masks of like Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, and Kim Jong-un.
The nuclear power trio?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, nuclear power trio. Yeah, it's wild. It is one of the strangest novelty acts I've ever seen. But it, like, you listen to it, and it's like, why are they even doing like the novelty gimmick? Like they're good enough. It's really weird. Like you watch their videos, they're like playing basketball and stuff. It's very silly. I highly recommend
Nuclear Power Trio.
Yes.
Nuclear power trio, yeah.
Okay.
Well, we live in an era. Yes, I highly
Yeah.
recommend it. We live in an era where you can do anything media-wise. Like your cell phone has a better camera than I'm sure the one you used for the documentary.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Absolutely.
Like full movies are shot on iPhones now.
Yeah.
So like because of technology, because I understand when people get mad at technology because it can be frustrating because it's constantly changing, but because of technology, you can pretty much do whatever you want. Like I only made my record because the tools to record is accessible now. Like those songs were written when like DJ and I were playing, and we did not have
15
any
years
way.
ago.
Yeah, we did not have a way to record it.
Something like that.
Yeah, we had
They
like
sound
a terrible,
like bees.
Yeah, yeah, we had
the riffs.
Yes, we had a like terrible demo, but now you can have people dressed up like political leaders playing symphonic metal on a basketball court. It's very bizarre. Like you can do anything now. So anyone out there, like if you want to make your own documentary, Rick isn't going to make it. So
it's become accessible for everybody. Anybody can go out there and make a documentary. Although I have to admit, though, showing up with the iPhones, your talent sitting in the chair, depending on what level you're aiming for, sometimes could be a little offsetting. When you see a kid show up with an iPhone and says, "I'm making a documentary." Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's good to come pack in, lights and a big camera. It's nothing else, just for show. But you're right. If you get a nice iPhone these days, it is better quality than the camera I was shooting on. Absolutely.
Yeah, so just get like a big like 80s camcorder and then just tape your iPhone to it. So
exactly.
Yeah, you want the allure that you're filming something, and also
just
wear the
dressing.
Yeah, and wear one of those hats that like the conductor ones, and get those puffy pants just on the top. You want to look the part.
And you need a clapboard. Take one. Interview, take one.
Yes, and get it with. You want the chalk one. You don't want the digital one. We're going all and get the megaphone. That's you want to look like you're serious, but you also want to look like you're not serious at the same time. That's what I'm going for.
I think it's a good plan.
It's the best plan. What was the last release you listened to from a band? And I don't mean like yesterday I listened to For Those About to Rock. Don't ask me why I brought that one up.
Man, the last release
like
I listened to.
Yeah, from a if the last release, for example.
The first one that's going to come to mind.
Well, let me clarify. Like, if the last new release was The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. Like, if that was the latest one, that's what I mean. Like, chronologically.
That's a great album. That probably is not the latest one.
Right.
And, I'm just trying to think. Like, the new Obituary album was amazing. I love a band called Avatar. They released a new album, but that was like 9 months ago. I'm trying to think whose new album.
I think Suffocation came out with the new album.
I have to go look at my downloads here and see what the heck is going on. What's the last thing I downloaded here?
Don't worry, this is all staying in.
I'm sorry, this is all like getting old and trying to.
It's important we know this.
Yeah. Well, John couldn't answer.
Well, John said that he went to like a record store last week and got a record from the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, it's new to me.
The new Voivod album. But none of these are new. They're all like, months and months old. So
months old is still new.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But the Sick, the Dying, and the Dead has not left my current playlist. I love that album. I
like that album too.
That's I don't know. To me, do you like Duran?
Look at this.
I'll use this again.
No,
that's fine. That's fine. But Duran put out an album in like 2010 or 11, and it sounded like they were trying to sound like 80s Duran.
Okay.
Like that, and that's what the Sick, the Dying, the Dead felt like. It felt more like Dave's like, I guess I have to write songs like this again. Like Dystopia is one of my favorite Megadeth records. It's probably in my top 4. I like it more than So Far, So Good, So What. I would go Peace Sells, Killing Is My Business, Rust in Peace, then probably Dystopia.
I'm gonna have to go visit Dystopia now as well. I should have had a pen and a pencil in here to write down some of this. Nuclear Trio, Dystopia.
Well, we'll send you some stuff.
DMX sings Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yes.
Christmas is coming. You need to have some good Christmas tunes.
It is coming.
But yeah, Dystopia felt very, very much kind of like, hey, what should we play? Like, well, let's get back to like the era when people really liked it. Like, let's get like that nice sweet spot. Because it feels like the missing album between Rust in Peace and Countdown to Extinction. Like that's the best way to put it. Like
that's actually a good way. Yeah,
because like when you go from Rust in Peace to Countdown, like I still like Countdown, but I think a lot of the songs it really feels like we need to sound more 90s. Like it feels like something is missing because Rust in Peace is very much classic Megadeth, and Countdown to Extinction is more like, well, let's get with the times. Where Dystopia, Dystopia feels like the middle of that, where it's still and lyrically, it's like his best lyrics, and I like almost all of his lyrics. I mean, I can't,
Dave's a great songwriter. Listen, he writes great lyrics. I was worried, new Megadeth album was coming out, The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead, and Dave's getting a little older.
Dave is old.
The vocals can be a little.
Went through cancer.
Throat cancer specifically.
What is he going to be able to deliver here? And like, he really, for the vocals that he's capable of delivering, he does a great job. I mean, he's not Joey Belladonna, so you're never going to have that, obviously. But he does, I think, a really good job of writing songs to fit his vocal style. And maybe that seems like a no duh, but for me, listening to Dave over the years and listening to this album, it's just like, you know what? He wrote lyrics and he wrote in a way that's smart enough that he's able to pull this off on the record and potentially live. I haven't seen him live on the tour, but again, I love the new album. I love the last 3, 4, 5 songs on it. Mission to Mars. And,
I like that one too.
Yeah, some really cool songs, and I find the last
Headbang on the Gangway
are my favorite songs.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I have to go.
You're in the minority, AC. Yeah.
Well, DJ built it up for months. He's like, "Oh no, you gotta hear it. It's the best album ever." I'll throw all my other records away. I'm like, all right, I'll listen to it. I'm like, I don't know.
I came in with the opposite. I'm thinking, okay, this is probably going to be the same old thing, and then I was like, wow.
That's how I thought it was going to be too.
My expectations were low.
That's probably what. That's what happened to me. Like the last Megadeth album before Dystopia was United Abominations, and I like the first album or the first song, Sleepwalker, as a perfect way to start a record. Washington is next. Is good, it's not great, it's good. And then the next album, the next song, I think it was Gears of War. And I was like, what the heck is this? And then the song after, I'm like, whoa, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And then I can't remember the album after that, but I think it was Endgame.
Endgame.
I think people like that one, but I was like, this is not Megadeth. Like this is like a Metallica record. Like what am I listening to? And then I just gave up. It's just like, okay, well, Megadeth's done. Like they're just if they play live, I'll go see them. But those songs will never be what they were. But Dystopia kind of like shocked me to my core. It was like, wow, I can't believe that Megadeth put this out at this time. Because I was thinking Dave is old then. Dave's
it's great
61.
when you get a release like that does that for you. And for me, The Sick, Dying, and the Dead did that. I was just like, wow, this is renewed my interest in current Megadeth material.
Yeah, I agree. That I had the same exact thing too. I had low expectations, and then I was, pleasantly surprised, and then I built it up so much so that AC had very high hopes. It was like,
and that's pretty typical. I remember growing up, and we would always try to find like the cool new band. Like we'd always try to dig a little deeper and introduce your best buddy to this band, and it was the same way. I'd find a band, they'd be like, oh, it's not as good as this. And then they'd find a band like, oh, it's not as good as that. So it's always a friendly competition amongst us growing up of who could find the coolest, heaviest new band. So,
well, what was the coolest, heaviest new band that you found?
I'm going to claim Snow White out of Chicago was a band that I discovered from listening to college radio, metal radio here in New York City. I'm going to also claim Heathen was a band that I found. I might get some argument on finding Violence, but I think I was the first guy to bring Violence into our group.
Man, no, you don't want to be known as the first one to bring Violence into your group until you get thrown out.
Right, the band Violence.
Okay.
And one of my favorite band Violence story is that Nirvana was on the verge of releasing Nevermind. And they were playing in New York City, and this is the time where, I don't know, I'm 20 years old, 21 maybe. I don't have any money. I'm not able to get into the city from the suburbs every weekend and see a show. It was actually a weeknight. And Violence was playing the next night. So I had to make a decision. Do I go see Nirvana? They're about to release this album called Nevermind. I don't know much about it, but Smells Like Teen Spirit sounds great. Or do I go see Violence? They have 2 albums out that I love, absolutely love. And I chose Violence. So when anybody asks, choose Violence.
Good answer.
Choose Violence over Nirvana.
Yeah,
it's a good message for the kids.
Settled.
Just in general.
In general, yeah. So I was talking I ran into some old timer at a show. This was years ago, back when I was probably in my teens still, and I used to always pick people's brains on this. I have much clearer picture now, but at the time I'd say what killed metal, and this guy said what lost metal really was, he said Rob Flynn was the heart and soul of thrash metal. I've never heard that before or since, but that's what he said. He said when Rob Flynn left Violence, that's what killed metal. And again, I mean, some people, they take certain bands closer to heart than others, so he may have been just the hardcore Violence fan.
Yeah, I would say that Violence. I would have to disagree with that.
See, that's what I was thinking, because I've never heard anyone ever say that. So
neither have I.
Oh, yeah, all sorts of revelations here. First guy to disappointed by the Black Album.
Violence, but the demise of Violence certainly, to me, was not the demise of thrash, because for me it just was. You had the Black Album.
It is the
perfect example of bands that released albums that were not that great, and stuff was kind of sounding the same. So in the same way, grunge offered something different. Death metal offered something heavier. So for me, that's what I gravitated towards. I gravitated towards the heavier stuff, and I gravitated towards some of the stuff that was a little bit different. It's not that I gave up going to see Metallica, Slayer, Anthrax. It's just that I was like, oh, there's some other options.
New blood.
There's some heavier options. There's some more melodic options. The grunge stuff is doing some things that are kind of different. For me, there was room for all of it. Obviously, the mainstream thought different, and metal was just kicked to the curb.
Yeah, and in Get Thrashed, you guys talk about the touring aspect, and that it wasn't mainstream, so these guys had to go out and tour. And I again, I'm going to quote Dave Mustaine here. He goes on to say, "We were getting worked so hard, and if you're going, we're getting worked so hard, and if you're just playing guitar or you're just playing bass, it's a lot easier than playing guitar and singing. I was getting ridden hard and put away wet every night. It was just destroying band morale." So, I mean, it makes sense that the content wouldn't naturally maybe be as good, because these guys are, they're getting worked pretty hard.
They've been ground into, they've been just pounded into the ground by the tour lifestyle. And the associate producer on Get Thrashed was Rat Skates. And Rat Skates was the original drummer for Overkill, like a founding member of Overkill. And we talked about that like off the record. He talks about it in the film. It's a really, really tough life. And he chose his family over, being a rock star. And I certainly respect that. And I gotta be honest with you, if I was in his shoes, I don't know if I would have been able to do it either. Like it's really, really tough. You have to have a certain personality and be cut out for it, because if not, it will cut you down. You will end up dead, rehab, or out of the band. One of those three, those are the options.
Gosh. And it's funny, Gary Holt said, it really cracked me up. He says like, hey, like, I don't have many like skills outside of playing guitar. So like, what do you do? Like, I thought that was great. Like, but
that's a good point.
You know what I mean? But he ended up becoming, there's a couple of foreshadowing in your documentary, Charlie Benante and Gary Holt, Slayer and Pantera, I thought that's kind of fascinating. And the way they were talking about those bands too, it's really almost freaky in a way.
Right? Is it?
Yeah. I don't know.
Or it just shows how connected that they all are. It's like, one guy drops the ball, the other guy picks it up. And I've maintained this for years. I think Gary Holt is probably the best guitar player in like the greater thrash metal world. Like he has such a unique way of playing leads, and his rhythm is insanely good, and he's just an extremely good songwriter. Like Slayer is just the perfect, not really destination for him, because he's still Exodus.
I mean, I can't say enough about Gary Holt. Certainly Exodus, one of the first thrash bands, even before Metallica.
Mm-hmm.
But Gary, I don't know if I'm going out on a limb. I don't think I am, to say Gary is to thrash what Tony Iommi would be to metal. For me, Gary Holt is the guy. Like when you talk about if Gary Holt would have just quit metal at a certain point, that would have been like a crushing blow for me personally. I don't know if it would have ended the thrash metal scene, but like Gary, I think is that important, and he's a great player, and he just epitomizes thrash metal, just like Exodus epitomizes thrash metal. So Gary is probably somebody that doesn't get enough credit, but for me, he was one of the most important players in this whole genre, and still is.
Well,
I agree with that.
It's weird that. Exodus in general, like Exodus is a band that like people know, but they're not as big as they really should be. And like Tempo of the Damned is the best album that was never released in the 80s. It is.
Tempo of the Damned is my favorite Exodus album.
It's mine too.
And people will tell me that, oh my God, you sacrilege, blood. No, Tempo of the Damned is my favorite Exodus album.
It's the most aggressive with the best riffs and the best vocals and the best production. Yeah. It's just like put everything together. Like Bonded by Blood is a weak production, and it doesn't punch as hard. Like just that guitar tone, hearing the opening notes of Star Spangled Banner, like just when the drums just punch in, it's the way an album starts is so much more important than people realize. Because especially now, everyone just does Spotify, which like only dum-dums use Spotify. But like people do things on Spotify. Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
I don't have Spotify.
I just like to check on how many monthly plays people get. Okay.
yeah, 2 against 1
popularity. Yeah.
but people will just listen to a song. I like to listen to a song in order, because this is how they wanted you to listen to it. This, like when I put my album out, which I'll still shill, it's available at Bandcamp. The Ancestors Call. It's
I have it.
Yeah, buddy.
No.
Yeah. What do you mean no?
No.
Go listen to Spotify, you dummy. But anyway, like I took the time to think about, okay, like how would I want to hear this? Like, okay, this is like the last song, The End of Light. That was the first song I ever wrote, like beginning to end. So like means something to me. That should be how I close it. Well, what about these other 7 songs? So I actually took the time. It took me like probably a week of just sitting on it. And can you imagine if Hell Awaits was not Hell Awaits and it was At Dawn They Sleep and that's how they started that?
Yeah.
Or if Rain and Blood didn't start with Angel of Death? And then
listen, it's a completely different, world we live in now, but I'm happy that I grew up when I grew up, and you guys probably as well experienced, listening to an album in order because it was too difficult, whether it be cassette or records to skip over things, even CDs. Like it was nice to listen to the CD in order, and most importantly, to be able to see a band and not have any knowledge of seeing them on YouTube. There's clips circulating. You have no idea what's going to happen when you go to a Slayer show for the first time. You've only heard rumors. There is nothing better than that. And that'll never happen again because of, the digital age we live in. But to be able to go to those shows, not knowing what to expect, I mean, it was awesome, opening a present on Christmas Day, but it was better, like 10 times better, to be able to walk into a Metallica Slayer show and not know what was going to happen. You had just heard rumors. People get killed at Slayer's show. You're scared. And the documentary, I think, points that out. We all were afraid walking into that Slayer show that we were going to get killed.
We might get killed. We gotta go.
Well, we gotta go. Absolutely.
And
then we can tell everybody we survived. We have war stories for the rest of our lives.
Oh, you guys went to a Slayer show? No way.
Yeah, when DJ and I were coming up, we knew the people that were like the generation above us. And even they, we knew some pretty scary guys, and they were scared of Slayer shows.
Yeah.
That's always been the thing. Mm-hmm. It was this is what I heard, the 2 scariest shows to go to, at their prime, it was Slayer and Pantera. Those were the 2 roughest crowds. Everything else, it's just kind of it's all kind of stock. It all just kind of blends together. It's not oh, you've been to an Exodus pit? That's nothing compared to a Dark Angel pit. It's not. It was just it was Slayer, Pantera, and then everything else. Nothing else had that reputation.
I mentioned that Anthrax, Exodus, Celtic Frost show, and I remember in between one of the bands they played Slayer, and I still at that point I'd never seen Slayer before. And just playing Slayer in between bands, people were going nuts and jumping over, chairs and ripping stuff up. And we're just oh my God, they're not even here, and this is what's happening.
It's just a tape. Calm down, you animal. What's wrong with you? We're trying to enjoy this concert.
And you mentioned Pantera. Pantera, played here in New York at the Nassau Coliseum. I remember going. I was on the floor. Prong and Sepultura opened, although Sepultura, for whatever reason, couldn't get in the country, so they didn't play. But I'll never forget, one of my favorite stories is I was wearing a white T-shirt, KNAC, which is a LA radio station that used to be, now it's KNAC.com. And I was wearing this white tank top, and somebody comes out of the Pantera pit, a little bit smaller than me, but bleeding. And he leans up on my shirt, and I look down, oh, dude, what are you doing? And I pushed him away. But I got blood all over me now. And all night long, people were coming up to me. They're going, dude, you're bleeding. And I said, that's not my blood. And they're I just run away.
Get some street cred.
Yeah, I try.
You want to add to it?
In my best Road Warriors voice. If you guys are wrestling fans, the Road Warriors.
I thought. Tag team. Yeah.
And it's not my blood. Oh, okay. So I Slayer and Pantera pits can be pretty hardcore.
Yeah, and you were interviewing Phil Anselmo, and my gosh, that must have been
did you ever go to his haunted house? Or was it
I think the haunted house was on the tour bus. It was a very difficult time, I would imagine. I have no idea what was going on. I can only guess. He's not in the film that often. Listen, you see what you see, but he could not have been any nicer.
Yeah.
And
good quotes.
And I'm telling you guys that Metallica were really cool and Phil was really cool. They were.
I assume they were all.
There were people that were not cool. I don't know that you think that everybody was great and it was all roses and daisies and whatnot. for whatever state Phil was in, and it looked like he was probably not in a good place at that time. It was before a super joint ritual show at Lemoore that I filmed with him. But listen, again, the guy could not have been any nicer.
Right.
And he was so open and interested in talking about metal and Celtic Frost and like anything. Like he was diving deeper than I was even asking him to go.
No doubt.
It's difficult to watch at times, I think. But, you know, on the flip side, you see where he was and where he is now.
Exactly.
And like, you know, it's pretty stark difference. You know, he's on stage. And I just saw them at Lamb of God out in Pennsylvania. You know, 15,000 fans cheering him on stage, as
amazing.
Opposed to, you know, what you saw him get thrashed.
Oh,
but
for
again,
sure.
Guy was super nice, super friendly. Not everybody was like that.
I could only imagine. You know, it's funny that the guys you might not expect are sweethearts are, you know.
Yeah.
And it's cool to hear those stories too. Like we need to know who, you know, who's a good person.
It's
you know,
it's important to know who we should try to reach out to have on our show. You know, it's good to know beforehand who would be a good guest, because you know they're not all going to be a good guest.
Phil's just a big metal fan, you know. So if you're there to talk about metal, whether you have an iPhone or a whole crew with you, or you don't have any camera, like he's so into it. Like he's really, really into it. So if you want to talk to him about metal, whether it was Forget Thrashed or something else, like he's a great guy to talk to, because he'll talk to you for hours until managers have to actually, you know, pull him away and say, you got to go up on stage. And again, dude, I'm there. It's just me and a camera. I'm on his tour bus. There's no room for lights. So it's not like I've got some big MTV crew with me. He's just talking, the two of us. And again, he, you know, was on his bus for an hour talking to him. He didn't have to do that. And a lot of bands didn't do that.
I can only imagine. Yeah. You interviewed a lot of bands, a lot of big names.
I tried to include as many bands as I could for a bunch of reasons. One, because I know as a fan and fans out there, you know, they want to see their favorites. I don't want people to say we forgot about this band or that band. I also wanted to be able to ask them these questions to, you know, really get a consensus of like, you know, who are the most important people, bands, and players in this film? You know, as I was mentioning before, you know, if somebody, one person out of 50 people I interviewed are mentioning, you know, that this band is important, you know, it's 1 out of 50. So we probably are not going to be able to spend too much time on it. I didn't want people to think that I picked and choose who was important because they were my favorites. What I can do is I can say I have 50 interviews here. From those 50 interviews, this is what most of the people said was important to them. And they were there. It was their scene. It was their band. I'm just documenting this. So that's why I tried to get as many as possible. Plus, it was just cool. I got to meet all my favorite bands.
Oh, heck yeah.
Is there anyone that you just couldn't get a hold of? And I'm not talking about the people that said no, but like, who did you try to get that you just couldn't reach?
Well, Tom Warrior from Celtic Frost, you know, was not able to get him. I couldn't reach him. This is also, remember, before Facebook.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know
MySpace
exactly.
was around, but MySpace was kind of not like the conduit for reaching out and getting in touch with people.
And a lot of those MySpaces weren't ran by those bands too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, he's the first one that comes to mind that I just couldn't.
Did you try like?
Did
you try like Kronos or King Diamond?
They're all couldn't get a hold of them. I don't know how to get a hold of them because I don't believe at the time they were on any record labels. And that normally was the first place that I would go. Hey, here's my record label list from MTV and working on Headbangers Ball. If these bands are not on a label, I'm in trouble because now I got to go to the MySpace page or I got to go online and try to figure out how to find them. And it's not like, you know, go on Blabbermouth and find, you know, Craig Lacero's phone number from Forbidden. You know, Greg is another guy from Forbidden. You know, I would have loved to have interviewed him in the pre-Facebook era. How do you find these people? So it's very difficult. But like you said, there were people that said no. You know, Mike Muir from Suicidal. He said there's, you know, a lot of documentaries going on right now. You know, I don't think I want to be involved, you know, but he did give us permission to use his music, as you see in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's respectable. I also want to comment. Like,
yeah,
he didn't say, like, no, who are you?
From Destruction. I showed up and he said, I have no voice and I'm barely going to be able to do the show tonight, so I can't do the interview. So we were unable to get him.
No, I understand that too.
Jason, Jason was in Voivod at the time, and Jason said he was sick and he couldn't do the interview. So
Jay Sonic, you mean?
Jason Newsted.
Yeah,
Jay Sonic.
He's credited. He's credited as Jay Sonic on that album.
Yeah, Jay Sonic was unavailable. He had flu or something. So it happens. But those are a few of the guys that I would love to have had, especially Tom from Celtic Frost.
Well,
yeah, saying Celtic or Celtic. I mean, I get to.
Oh gosh, we're gonna get the hate mail. Yeah. Someone said it wrong. 50% of us is wrong. I don't know which is which. Oh, geez, we're embarrassing.
I grew up Celtic Frost, but now more, it's supposed to be Celtic. But
I grew up Celtic, but it's no one calls them the Boston Celtics.
The Celtics.
Because that's true. That's true.
So, I know the band as Celtic Frost, and what it really comes down to is it's a band from Switzerland that its English is probably not their primary language. So whatever they say it is what it is. And you could just be wrong because they've mistranslated it. I heard the story with Merciful Fate was King Diamond said he honestly did not know it was spelled wrong. I don't know if that's true, but that was the story that I heard is why is Merciful Fate stylistically spelled like that? And then apparently he said, I didn't know it was spelled wrong at the time.
Yeah, listen, spelling mistakes happen.
Well, yeah, and I mean, on my albums, on my first release, the apostrophe was in the wrong spot, and oh gosh, so there's 10 things up until the album where it's wrong because the guy who was doing the art for me, I was just so thrilled that he was doing it for free that I just didn't have time to proofread.
Look that he did it wrong.
Yeah, because I happened to see it on someone made a page for me on Metal Archives. I'm like, wait, that's not how it is. And then I look at the logo, like, oh no! But that was the thing that we used to do with the three German bands because they're the big three of Europe. They're all from Germany. And we used to laugh at their spelling mistakes and their grammar. It's
pronunciation.
Really yeah, there's all it's in good fun. It's still Prime Creator. I have to say that because Creator has a dark period. Even though after Enemy of God they got back on track, but them almost all of Sodom. I can't tell you a release by them that I dislike. And also Prime Destruction. It's some of the best records ever created, but we just when you're 16 and you're reading lyrics and just the lyrics are just the English is just butchered. It's just funny. It's a good fun.
That would be an interesting documentary. You had the Bay Area scene that was recently documented. It'd be interesting to see somebody do a documentary on the German thrash metal scene.
Or how about just regional?
It would need to be somebody that was there and involved in it and that can access those bands easily without having to fly over to Germany. But I certainly would be interested in that.
Well, here's the project. Instead of it being a German thing, it's just a regional metal documentary. You just go place by place. Because you mentioned in the the LA metal scene was this, but in New York you have these, and these regions, they had their own kind of distinct sound almost.
Yeah.
So you could absolutely do almost a global project. You could have people documenting the Brazilian bands, and then you could have people doing the German ones, people doing the Swedish ones.
Yeah, you can do some Swedish.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking more like the death metal, but.
I'm thinking. I'm sorry. I'm getting my Swedish and Swiss mixed up. Celtic Frost and Coroner,
yeah.
Swedish death metal. Yes.
Yeah, you could just document all these places that are Norwegian black metal is the most
Florida
obvious
death
one.
metal.
Florida death metal. Yeah. I think that's a potential project for anyone listening. Rick won't do it, but
I got a full-time job, man. I'm booked.
Yeah,
I'd love to get back at the metal docs, but
what are you up to now? What are you up to now, Rick? What are you currently working on?
These days, I'm working on a true crime series for A&E. It's a show called After the First 48. It's sort of a sister show to a show called The First 48. The idea being, in the first 48 hours, cops will do whatever they can to solve the crime, because after the first 48 hours, the chances of solving the crime diminish incrementally as the days and hours go by. So it's a true crime show that airs on A&E. And I'm also working on a show called On Patrol Live, which used to be called Live PD.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's new Cops.
Think of a show,
yeah.
If you think of Cops, sort of like Cops, but if Cops was live, broadcast live. Well,
Cops wasn't live?
If Cops was live, yes, that's what this show is. And that's also, it's on Reels on Friday and Saturdays.
Wow.
So how do you compare that to doing Get Thrashed?
Get Thrashed took 5 years, and it was all me sitting in an edit room. On Patrol Live is live, and within 4 or 5 hours, you've seen people get arrested, sometimes shot and killed, and then it's over. And then you do it again the next day.
Now, so here's my
blitzkrieg versus like a war of attrition.
It's like Stalingrad versus the entire Pacific Theater.
Yeah, sort of.
Well, okay, so they're both kind of like a bloody, grueling battle in their own way. But which one was more tolerable for you?
You talking about Get Thrashed versus the other gigs?
No, Stalingrad versus Pacific. Obviously, Get Thrashed.
I mean, Get Thrashed versus live TV. Listen, I mean, Get Thrashed is like I said, my second kid. Like,
right.
Proud of the film, and would do it again. Certainly with newer digital cameras, 1080 and all that stuff that we have. But I think the film stands the test of time. When I was making it, I thought that it really doesn't matter in terms of the amazing lighting or cameras. If you can see and you can hear these people, I think the fans will forgive me for not shooting it in 16 millimeter, 35 millimeter, 1080, 4K. None of that was available at the time. If I could just tell a good story, if I can just tell the story that all the fans lived through and they can relate to it and they can see themselves in the film, if I could just do that, if I could just relay my experience, which is hopefully the experience of most other thrash metal fans, they'll forgive all the warts and all the, freckles or whatever, on the film. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of old VHS footage that when you play it on the big screen in the theaters, like we did for the film festival run, kind of breaks up and it looks very grainy and fuzzy. It doesn't look good at all. Some of the interviews were shot, Phil Anselmo on a tour bus, no lights, people in front of garbage pails. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's kind of appropriate. It's kind of appropriate for the genre, especially when you still have people coming up to me and say, oh, it's a great, great that you did that trash metal documentary. It's not trash metal. It's thrash metal documentary, but okay. But it fit.
I know what I said.
Stylistically, it fit.
Well, okay. So I've seen a pretty good number of documentaries, and the Phil Anselmo stuff did stand out to me, but it almost looked, I mean, and I'm talking specifically about the framing of it, but I never once thought like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. It feels very stylistic. Like you shot Kerry King and Tom Araya here. They're like sitting on a bed in a hotel room, and then you have and then Exodus is in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, and then Blitz is on a park bench. It just feels like everyone has their own flavor to it.
And I want to say that was on purpose, and it sort of was on purpose, but really we were at the mercy of what we were given. Phil Anselmo was not in a hotel room; he was on his tour bus, so that's what we had. I couldn't frame it really any differently, to be honest with you, because I'm on a tour bus. I've got no room to do anything. I can't even remember if I had a light in there because it was so tight quarters. I must have had a light, but I don't remember. But that was something that was forced upon me, but I also embraced. I love the fact that each time somebody pops up, they're in a different spot. And a lot of times especially working on shows for TV, big networks like A&E. They want everything nice and clean, and we have a certain stylistic look. Everybody's sitting in their office with the nice lighting. I really love the fact that we shot everybody in all these different locations because, again, they each have their own personality. Each shoot, each interview has their own look and personality and feel. And it was kind of on purpose, but I am proud of that.
It's less boring that way. Like more is going around. A good example. Do you like Star Wars?
Sure.
Do you like the Star Wars prequels?
They're okay.
Okay, you can say no if you want. George Lucas is not listening.
I don't hate them. Love them.
Well,
they've been okay.
Well, if you go back and watch Empire Strikes Back and then watch Attack of the Clones, the way that Empire Strikes Back is filmed versus like Attack of the Clones is like when there's no action, it's like someone sitting on a couch talking to someone sitting on a chair, and occasionally someone will get up and walk to a window and then they'll go back to sitting on the chair. It's the whole movie. Like someone pointed that out. They're like everyone is just sitting on a chair when they're talking. And it's every scene is like that. It's so boring. And then when you have a bunch of guys, and it's not like here's chapter 1, Phil Anselmo, chapter 2, Lars Ulrich. It's just like it's all just the way it's all cut together. I don't want to say manically, but it's like no one. It's not like these people for a period of time, and it's just everyone is inserted whenever. And not that this, like the way I just described it almost makes it seem like nonsensical and chaotic, but it's not. It's all topical. It's paced well. Like I wasn't like looking at my watch while watching it, but like the way that it is shot, it feels like not amateurish, but it feels like who's the guy that made the low budget movies in the 80s? Is it Roger Corman? I think it's Roger Corman. Like he did like Little Shop of Horrors.
Roger Corman.
But he would make all of his movies like really, really cheap.
Yeah.
But they weren't bad. They were just cheap. Like sure, like there's like, oh, that set was used in that movie or whatever. But that's how it feels like. It's like, okay, I only have this much to work with. Let's make it look as good as possible with what I have. That was the impression that I got. Because and I've seen plenty of those A&E shows. Like what's the drug addict show? Gosh dang it! Oh.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Oh my gosh, Intervention.
Intervention.
Like because of that, it's like everyone is interviewed exactly the same. Sure, like there's like some like real footage stuff, and then it's a little more raw and gritty. But just everyone else, it's filmed exactly the same. So when you see all these people, and they're all shot in unique ways, and in the way it's all woven together, it really is. It's a really nice product. You should be very proud, and you call it your second son.
I really appreciate you saying that because it was a lot of time and effort, put into it to lay out the story so that fans and non-fans can kind of understand it. And like I said, the way it was shot, a lot of it was a product of what I was handed. But tried to always make the best of it, and then eventually it became like, wow, this is great. I love the fact that they're all in different locations because, like you said, it's just where are these guys been back at that club? Are they in back at Lemoore? Are they in back at Don Hills? Where is this? Are they in a hotel room? If Frank Bello, is that at Rick's house? Yes, Frank Bello was shot in my living room.
You shot him? Oh my gosh. Rick Ernst is in favor of violence. He shot Frank Bello in his living room. My gosh, what kind of guests do we have on here?
Like I said, I'm glad you're saying that because for me watching it, like it's interesting for me to remember all the places where these interviews took place and what went into setting them up and whatnot. So you're warming my heart, my violent heart. My
violent heart. That's the country song that you're going to write later tonight. All right, I'm gonna write a song for you called "My Violent Heart." I'm gonna put a
My
country
Violent
song
Heart.
on my next
Excellent.
album.
It's gonna
Not
be
my
on
achy breaky heart.
next Ancestors Call album, maybe.
Yep,
It's gotta be.
I'm gonna do it. Yep, Reconquer. I've already started recording it.
Excellent.
Album art is done, but now I just need to write a country song called "My Violent Heart."
I love it. I love it.
Well, don't say it until you hear it. I'm not a good country songwriter.
I got faith in you. After the first Ancestors Call album,
Thank you.
I'm going to go out on a
appreciate that.
limb. Say I'm going to like it.
All right, perfect. DJ, I interrupted you to make a terrible joke, so you go ahead.
No, because we've talked about it. It seems like you're a perfect person for us to ask this non-metal question, but we want to know how many murders or the percentage go unsolved in America. If you might know that, if you're doing that.
I should know that from working on the show, but
sorry to put you on the spot.
I do not.
Okay,
I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question.
Well, that's a good piggyback, because next week we're actually going to do a true crime episode, pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me more. You want to tease it right now? You can tease it. Next week.
No. We'll send it to you. But yeah, it's something that definitely you know about. I guarantee you know about it. I don't know if you know all the details of it, but let's just say it's something that took place in the South. I guarantee you know about it. Just
all right. Is this Humpty Dumpty falling off a wall? Because I thought it was an accident.
No. Okay, you know what? That guy had a great fall. Who has a fall and says, "Boy, what a great fall"? He went into a million pieces.
You're going to tell us he was new evidence that he was pushed.
No, we have new DNA evidence has come to light. Well, see, here's the thing. Like back then, I mean, the stories are all fuzzy. I mean, can you blame them though? It was relayed to us by a goose. Okay. Who can keep the story straight from a bird? But no, it's something that took place in the South. You'll know it immediately. We have an author and a lawyer, an investigator coming on who has a lot of the details of the case. And boy, it should make a lot of people really question what they know, because you as a documentary filmmaker. You show people what you want them to see. You could make anyone look as good or bad as you want to, just in the editing bay.
Yeah.
And it's with the documentary about like thrash metal. It's kind of hard to smear something like that, because you're covering pretty much a decade. But we're talking about something that was screw it. I'll tell you. We're going to be talking about the West Memphis 3.
I was going to ask, does this have anything to do with the West Memphis 3 and the guys, Joel that did the Metallica documentary?
Yeah.
No, we're having a different guy on. Yeah, it's a lawyer, an investigator, and oh boy, the things that people do not know, it will shock you.
Right. And I was going to ask, because those kids were certainly metalheads, right? And there's a tie-in to that Metallica documentary, because the guys who did the Metallica documentary did a documentary on the West Memphis 3. So I think a lot of metal fans like myself are familiar with them for that reason, because the directors of the Metallica Some Kind of Monster doc did a documentary on the West Memphis 3, which was very, very well done. But again, opens it up to, I think, a metal audience that could understand and maybe familiar with the topic when you guys discuss it. So,
yeah, because DJ and I, we do know some things about this, and we'll keep it close to the chest until the episode. But I urge everyone, stay tuned for next week's episode, because it's gonna rock your socks. Well, Rick, you have been an absolute delight. What would you like to plug anything and everything that you possibly can?
Listen, I would just say that if you're a metal fan and you like thrash metal or just metal in general, check out Get Thrashed. The easiest place to find it these days is on Amazon Prime. I hear it's on something called Tubi as well. I don't know what that is, but that's great. And getthrashed.com if you really want a DVD or a T-shirt. You could certainly go to getthrashed.com, or if you just want to see me in a Destruction shirt in 1986, you can do that as you can do that as well. But I'm proud of the film, and I'm proud that people like yourselves are still discovering it and enjoying it 15 years after it was released. And it's cool. And like I said, Amazon Prime, you can check it out. Getthrashed.com, there's more info. I appreciate the opportunity, really, guys. Thank you.
No, thank you for hopping on, and thank you for making that documentary. I think it's very important. I think everyone should just watch it, just in general. But yeah, again, can't appreciate your career and your work and your dedication to metal. I mean, thank you, Rick. Really appreciate this.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
All right, and thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next week.